If you're struggling with heat and humidity, if you're afraid of dehydration or the potential of a heat stroke, let me show you 3 specific things that you can do that'll preserve your athletic performance and, more importantly, save your health. Let's take a look. The first thing that you can do dealing with heat and humidity is get prepared. Now, ironically, most people think about it's right before your workout, right before your race. It actually starts the day before. I want you to grab your Garmin dashboard and I want you to look at your morning weight against your evening weight last night. If you have followed me for any period of time, you know that I'm a big fan of the Garmin dashboard and how easy it is for you to look these numbers up. You need to be going to bed 3, preferably 5 pounds heavier than you woke up this morning. When you go to bed at night and the body goes through its recovery process, you're going to naturally lose, ironically, 3 to 5 pounds of weight. You didn't work out throughout the night, so that's how we know that you've lost a tremendous amount of water weight. What we don't want to see is we don't want to see you wake up in the morning at 150, you go to bed at 145, you wake up tomorrow at 140, see a trend and a pattern. By the end of the week, you're just dehydrated. So when we're looking at the idea of how do we make sure that we don't fall victim, not in a negative way like woe is me, but how do we not fall under the thumb of heat-related issues? How do we avoid dehydration? How do we avoid heat stroke symptoms before they become full-blown heat stroke? Get prepared. When you're exercising like this, right, you're going to be we're going to talk about this in suggestion number 2. You're going to want to be using some ice-cold energy fuel. Well, with that being said, make sure that you've got ice cubes made tonight out of energy fuel. Take your energy fuel, mix it up as 20 ounces, 2 scoops, get it shaken up, put it in your ice tray, freeze it, and you'll have that for tomorrow. We'll talk about that here in a second on how you utilize it. Another thing that you can do on the side of preparation is we talked a little bit about the hydration morning and evening. We talked about having energy fuel ice cubes available. If we kind of run this a little bit further, this is where race day simulation comes in. Now, I don't want to confuse this idea with what we're going to talk about next. We're talking about how do you get prepared? Well, in this video, I want to kind of go through the idea that you've got to train and then eventually we're going to go racing. So when we're looking at how do you prepare to deal with heat and humidity, this is where race day simulation comes in. Now, when we talk about doing race day simulation, try to match the time in the day, strive to match the time of day that you're going to be doing your race. The heat and humidity, try to get those temperatures and get the humidity percentage as close to that as possible. And again, it's not a perfect science, but what is most important is, once again, we go back to the Garmin, make sure that you know what intensity, what heart rate range are you going to be competing off of. The longer the race, the more important your numbers are, because as your body starts to lose more water, you start to become a little bit dehydrated during the event, you might need to be adjusting your intensities. You need to adjust your intensity early so that you can finish stronger. Now, each event's a little bit different. If you're doing something like an Ironman that's 7.5 to 8 hours for the top pros, you got to remember you want to finish stronger than you start, so that means you have to start relatively conservatively, otherwise you're going to go backwards. Now, I want to stay really focused on this first subject about what do we do before? Stay hydrated, make sure that you've got ice cubes with energy fuel, and then when you're looking at preparation for racing, make sure that your race day simulation matches the intensity, the duration, the temperature, and the humidity. And then when we do go racing, you're properly prepared. You've already established a strategy based on the characteristics of the race. Something else that you can do, again, staying on the same thread of thought there in regards to what do you do before you go out and you train extremely hard and or you go race? You need to extend your warm-up. I know this may seem counterintuitive, but you want to allow for a nice slow adaptation. You want to have an acclimation mode where the body has a chance to bring the core temperature up slowly, reducing the overall stress on the body. At the end of this video, I've got a link to a video where I spoke more in depth about this, but for the sake of this video and what we're talking about, the first thing is about being properly prepared before you even, jump into hot, humid conditions. It'll make a little bit more sense when we get through number 2 and 3. Number 2 is dealing with the stress associated with race day. We refer to it as stress management. We talked about it at the end of number 1 that when you're doing your race day simulations, it needs to be in the same temperature, to the best of your ability, of course, same temperature and the same percentage of humidity. You need to know what your heart rate intensity zones are going to be. Now, when you're looking at your heart rate zones, you've got to realize that every time that heart rate range changes by 5 to 10 beats, you're consuming more electrolytes. You're putting a bigger demand on the body to convert sugar into energy. That means metabolic byproduct has to learn to be adapted to. You're teaching your body how to wick away heat efficiently. When we talk about race day simulation, what I want you to think about is we're now moving from preparation, now we're talking about race. We're talking about the management of stress. Well, the more you dial in your preparation, race day simulation, the easier it is for your body to adapt to it during the race itself. It's what we call the familiarity principle. Nailing your intensity zones, and this is where we're going to add a second dynamic of complexity, and that is maintaining core body temperature. I will go so far as to say that I need you and want you to focus on keeping your core temperature under control more than anything else. And here's the reason why. If you don't give the body what it needs, it's going to take what it needs. It's going to take what it wants. If you follow me for any period of time, you've heard me talk about the hierarchy of needs. When you're exercising and/or racing, your body's number one concern is to not die of a heat stroke or to freeze to death. Well, you start choking down calories, the body's going to shut down the nutrition breakdown. It's going to shut that whole system down way before it's going to shut down its desire to maintain core body temperature. So what I say to you respectfully is don't argue with the hierarchy of needs. Keep the fluids coming in as ice cold as possible. If you find that you're starting to get overheated, slow your pace down. I know you don't like to hear that if you're hyper competitive, but you're a human being, and if the body overheats, the system's going to gradually shut itself down. It's going to slow you down first, and then it literally will take you to your knees in the form of cramping and other unwanted situations and circumstances for sure. Along that thread of thought, I want you to monitor what we call real-time reactions. If you find yourself getting dizzy, if you find yourself getting nauseous, if you have the visual cues of like the arms are no longer sweating, if you feel like you feel like you would feel better if you're able to regurgitate and purge what's in your stomach, those are real-time cues that something is out of balance. Pay attention to it. I can't emphasize how important that is. You could stay bullheaded if you want and try to push through these characteristics and situations, but I'm here to tell you that unfortunately you will ultimately lose. The body will take what it needs, and if it means slowing you down to a crawl and literally putting you on your knees, that's where you'll end up, and we'd like to avoid that, of course. Without getting too far over the front of our skis, what I'm going to talk about with number 3 here, I need to pull a little bit of a snippet here into the tail end of number 2, and that is you should have your sweat rate already calculated. And if you know what your sweat rate calculations are, it helps you put together a rehydration strategy on the front side. Topic number 2 is about, hey, how do I maintain my core body temperature during the race itself? Well, if you know what your sweat rate is based on, go all the way back to number 1 when you do your race day simulation, temperature, time of the day, then that factors in humidity, your average and your max heart rate. You now know what your perspiration rate is at that intensity for that duration based on temperature and humidity. I don't want it to sound complicated. What are you subjecting the body to? And are you able to maintain core body temperature? Obviously, we need to make sure we have adequate calories as well. But when we're talking about dealing with heat, dealing with humidity, trying to avoid symptoms of heat stroke, we need to stay focused on preparation, then race day simulation. But then when it comes to race day, you actually have to follow your strategy. And this is a very volatile conversation because on one hand, you'll hear some people say, if they're not very educated, you have to respond to the race. You just go with the race. Well, that's kind of foolish because if you've tested it in training and you've already found where that threshold is, where that breaking point is at, you don't want to cross it during the race because if you do cross it, unfortunately, you will go backwards. And I don't want that for you. So I really appreciate your patience as we go through this. It's not as complex as it sounds when you zoom out, but you have to set the context of each one of these nuggets of knowledge and then understand how to integrate them so that you can perform optimally. So you've gotten through the preparation phase. You've gotten through high-end workout and or a race. Now the race is over. How do we recover from heat and humidity? How do we avoid those dreaded symptoms that typically come with dealing with hot, humid conditions, especially in a competitive environment? As crazy as it may sound, the first thing you want to avoid is trying to choke down a ton of calories. Remember, when the core body temperature goes up, digestion is shut down. So if you try to stuff a ton of calories in, you're either going to regurgitate it or it's going to blow through your bottom end. And I don't want to sound sarcastic, but I've seen this over the last 40 years, and it's not something that I want you to endure. So the first thing you want to do without getting in trouble is get out of as much clothing as you can and expose as much skin as you can. Your skin is the largest organ in your body. And so for your body to get rid of the heat, it needs to be exposed. We want to get into the shade. We don't want to go and jump into an ice bath. We don't want to go jump into something that's going to create additional stress. If there's one thing that I get a lot of pushback on based on my public podcasts that I do, it's my resistance to ice baths. If you're driving during the winter and you drive your car into a frozen lake, what is the first responder's number one concern? That you don't die of hypothermia. Well, if you just got done and your core temperature is up and you've been in the direct sun for whatever period of time, and I go and I throw you into an ice bath, think about the amount of stress that that's submitting the body to. Now, any body of water, even if it's tap water cool, is gonna feel cold. That's enough of a temperature deviation to cool the body down quickly without shocking it. And I'm going to leave that there. I could do an entire series of videos on why ice baths immediately after aren't very advantageous. For those of you that are in the moto world, just to go with me here hypothetically, your race is over and I'm able to pull your motor out and I throw that motor in that ice bath that you're about to jump into, the thermoconstriction, the temperature deviation is so stark that it's going to crack the engine casings. That's thermal stress. Your body doesn't want that stress, I can promise you. So when we're looking at recovery, you want the same way that we brought the heart rate up slowly. We covered that in another video that'll be linked here at the end of this video. We talked about the idea that you've got to bring the heart rate up slowly, give the body a chance to acclimate. Well, you need to bring the recovery window down and reduce stress to the best of your ability. Now let's put these two together. You're not choking down calories, stress, and you're not shell shocking yourself with ice cold water. The body can come down and start the recovery in a very stress-free environment. What you do want to focus on is isotonic drinks. I own a company called Energy Fuel. It's a product that we worked on for an extended period of time, and we ended up coming up with 3 different formulations that are specific to intensity and duration. Put those two together. The shorter the duration, the higher the heart rate. The longer the event, lower the heart rate. So we have formulations, we have molecules of sugar that matches the ease of digestion. But what I want to talk about here on this third subject is we need to be bringing in liquid calories and they need to be ice cold. The colder the fluids, the quicker they absorb. The reason why the absorption is so important is you're depleted of electrolytes. Energy Fuel has an abundance of electrolytes, so you don't need salt tabs and salt sticks and you don't need anything else. Just start hitting the Energy Fuel. But remember, it needs to be ice cold. And remember what we said at the beginning, your Energy Fuel needs to be cooled with ice cubes made of Energy Fuel. That keeps the carbohydrate concentration mix consistent. All we're trying to do is replenish, and a lot of people are not aware of this, electrolytes play a significant role in muscle contraction. Electrolytes play a significant role in water absorption. So the event is over. You want those electrolytes to help you absorb water. Now we're going to start offsetting the negative side effects of dehydration. We're going to avoid cramping because the electrolytes are up and the water absorption is up. You're bringing the core temperature down slowly, so you're reducing stress, and within a couple hours you're going to be willing to start eating some solid food. The magic number is about 2 hours. It's the same thing before an event. You don't want to choke down complex food any closer than 2 hours from the start of when you're going to bring the heart rate elevated. 2 hours is the magic number for absorption and purging. So we put those 3 things together. The cool part about it is you've kind of prime the system. You're learning how to deal with heat and humidity. You're able to regulate it during the event, and now the event is over, you're speeding up recovery. I can't thank you enough for sticking with me this far, and because you have, I'm going to give you a bonus. If you follow me for any period of time, I'm a huge fan of the Garmin dashboard. And one of the benefits of the Garmin dashboard is it has a multitude of elements that it evaluates. It can look at your recovery. We can look at heart rate, body battery, HRV. We can look at the performance side of things. We can look at your average and your max heart rate. It can tell us your calorie burn rate. Well, this is where the Garmin becomes your best friend, because remember how we started number one, looking at your morning weight against your evening weight? Well, this goes back to, do you know what your sweat rate is during those high-end workouts? Do you know what your sweat rate is during race intensity? Even if you go out and you win the race that you signed up for, congratulations, I'm proud of you. You trained to win. So please don't act surprised that you've won. What becomes the most what becomes the most valuable component of data is the telemetry that comes out of it. How fast could you go? How long could you maintain it? How many calories did you burn? What was your perspiration rate? Well, that's where the collected data allows you to immediately be able to put a strategy together for your next race. If the race is at about the same temperatures and the same humidity for about the same distance, you've got a pretty good blueprint on what works. What I do with my clients is I use that information and we use that in training. You've got a benchmark now. You know what you're capable of. How do we elevate that by 1%? I want to improve not only your speed, but how long you can maintain that. What are the things that are going to negatively impact that potential? Dehydration, electrolyte depletion, right? These are things that unfortunately, and we have to use a negative to look at the positive, if you become dehydrated, you run the risk of heat stroke. If you become depleted on the electrolyte side, you're going to deal with cramping. So when we're looking at an isotonic drink and we're looking at the isotonic concentration rates, this is where our energy fuel has a science behind it. You simply need to mix 2 scoops to 20 ounces. It gives you the right ratio of carbohydrates for absorption, gives you the right amount of calories, and it gives you the necessary electrolytes. Not a sales pitch on energy fuel. It's an education on how do we deal with heat and humidity. How do we deal with heat and humidity to avoid heat exhaustion? How do we avoid, nobody wants to go through a heat stroke. How do we identify the symptoms? More importantly, how do we avoid the symptoms? And that's what I hope you got out of today's video. I want to thank you for sticking with me. I know this is a video that has a lot of components to it, but if you followed me for any period of time, I always want you to be getting the full context. I'm not going to just say do something or not do something. I want you to always understand the why. So thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. The number continues to grow month over month, and I'm forever thankful. If you have not liked and subscribed, please do so. It helps the algorithm, of course. More importantly, I put a video out every day and I want you to be aware of it. Please send me an email. If you happen to have a question, I'd love to answer it. Every video we put out is from your questions. So please send me an email at your convenience, contact@coachrobb.com. Our mission here is to make sure that we answer all of your questions. I've been doing this for 40 years and I couldn't be more enthralled by the amount of support you guys have given the channel, and your questions continue to get more complex as you're seeing here in these videos. I've got 2 more videos that continues to this conversation about heat and humidity, and I hope you find it helpful.